All right, let's start. So this evening, we're talking about the requirements lifecycle, specific emphasis on elicitation and documentation. My name is 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐂𝐓, and I'm a business analyst and a product owner. I'll be one of the product owners for the session. So yeah, looking forward to working with every one of you, all of you. All right, so just a quick insight into what we're going to be talking about. We're going to define requirements, different kinds of requirements, the framework. Then we're going into elicitation, the techniques. We're going to talk in depth about requirements, elicitation techniques. I'll talk to you a bit about challenges you face while you're conducting requirements elicitation, and then the final note as well, which will consist of bits and pieces and telling you about what we're going to do once the session is over. So yeah, all right. So requirements are features or characteristics, that a product or a project needs, a service needs to meet the value requested by the stakeholders. Okay, that's very technical, but I'm just going to try and break it down. So businesses are driven by business needs, objectives, goals. They'll always say that in order to get our goals, we need a particular product, or we need a particular we need to deliver a particular service, we need to sell a particular product. So in order to build that, normally they have the IT team build or deliver these goals or objectives. In order to do that, you need to articulate what that service consists of. What is that need that is going to be met? What is that value that is going to be delivered? And the way to articulate it is requirements. Let me break it down a bit for you. So a business says, for example, let's say I want to eat rice. I want to eat rice and stew or something, or maybe jollof rice. That's just a need. I'm hungry, and in order to meet my hunger, I need to eat rice. Okay. Now, what the requirement is in order to deliver jollof rice to the person who is hungry, what do I need? I need white rice. I need cooking oil. I need a kitchen to cook it. I need the ingredients to make the oil, palm oil. I need maybe beef, chicken, whatever it is that your kind of jollof rice needs to include. Those are the requirements. By the time you get the requirements and you build it, you get the final product and then deliver it for the business. So every feature and every characteristic, every need, every condition is called a requirement. And for BAs, requirements are our lifeblood, is at the heart of what you do. And it's at the heart of every successful change initiative. You have to find out what the requirements are. I've shown you this this image before, and they're talking about why projects fail. And as you can see, 50% of the reason projects fail is the poor definition of, or poor requirements definition. People just feel it's not important. After all, if we want a mobile app, is it not just a mobile app? Let's just go and get a mobile app. But in order to get the right kind of the mobile app for that business, in order to meet the budget, in order to meet the customer needs, in order to meet the business needs, you have to define what kind of mobile app are we talking about? What kind of application are we talking about? What kind of system are we talking about? So all these things make up what all the requirements makes up what the particular system or service or product will entail. And that system or service or product will in turn deliver value to the business or to the stakeholders. Okay, so some key aspects of the requirements life cycle, or the whole requirements, because it's called the life cycle. It's not just done once, it's done regularly. Anyone who tells you that requirements life cycle is linear is very misleading. It's cyclical. It goes round. So you start it, you elicit, you document, you analyze, you prioritize, you deliver, you elicit, you just keep going round and round and round until that project is delivered. Especially when you're talking about an agile, a project that is run using agile. Okay, we're going to talk a bit more about that. But like I said, so the key point is elicitation. Once you elicit, you document it. Once you document it, you start analyzing it. Analysis includes prioritization. Which one is more important? Okay, yes, we have all the requirements now, but one is more important than the other, or you have to deliver one before the other. That's called prioritization. The ranking, and how are we going to order it? You know, which one is most important to have? Which one can we say, okay, if we have it, it'll be really cool? Which one can we say icing on the cake? And which one can we say it's fine, we don't really need this particular requirement? So that's prioritization. Then there are constraints and compliance needs as well. And then you now have performance and quality. So even though you've delivered a particular thing, I don't know how many of you have been onto some websites. The website is up and running, but you click on something and it takes forever to load. The performance is not good. Before you know it, users will start leaving. What quality are you going to deliver? So all these things are aspects of the requirement elicitation process that you have to determine so that the project team will be able to deliver. As a BA, the project doesn't start until you start. The project needs requirements to work. They're not just going to build anything. You have to give them what they're going to build. It's just like an architect. You have to give them the what do they call it now? For architects, you have to give them the diagram. I'm sure I'm not using the right word, but you have to give them some what you want them to build. What is the what's the measure? What are the measurements and everything? If you want to build a house, you have to actually create the diagram. I'm honestly losing the words at the moment, but a builder will not start building until they see that architectural diagram. Okay, you have to know how many windows, how many floors, how many doors, all the aspects of the house. You know, you have to have all that given to the builder before they start working. In the same way, the IT team, the project team does not start working until you deliver the requirements to them. And that means that if the project starts in sprint 1, sprint 0, which you're in now at the moment, is okay, the team is forming and all of that. Even while that is happening, the BAs have already started working. Because by the time you get to sprint 1 and they want to start working on requirements, the requirements have to already have been delivered. So that's why we say that BAs work ahead of the sprint. So while people are in sprint 1, you've delivered the requirements for sprint 1. While they're delivering it during that week, you're still working on sprint 2. By the time they get to sprint 2, you have the requirements there. You start working on sprint 3. So the BA always front loads the requirements that is needed for the project. It doesn't start until the BA starts. And one of the terms that BAs are referred to are called, our role is called the role that bridges the gap. So you have the business on one side and you have the IT team on one side. The BA is the function that sits between the business and the IT team. They get your requirements from the business and then they translate it and provide it for the project team. So your role is very, very important. And I know that some of you in your project teams, you know, I think there are 2 or more of you, 2, 3 or more. But in most projects, there's usually one BA, except the project is so large that, you know, it's now broken down into squads. And then each squad has a BA. So they're all working on different aspects of the project. But normally you have just one BA per project because that's usually all we need. But a lot of times we're the ones that do that front loading of the requirements. So it's very important that you understand what requirements elicitation is, because in order for the team to do their work, you need to provide the requirements for them. So I've spoken on some of these things already. Requirements are really very important to the business because it aligns the solution with the business need. The IT team is not all they're asking for is, what do you want us to deliver? What do you want us to work on? What what do you want us to develop? What do you want us to test? So a lot of times it's the BA that has to keep the actual business need in mind. Is the project team delivering what the business wants it to deliver? You must have that alignment there. It has to be there, because you can deliver the best product possible, but if it's not what the business needs, then your project is I mean, it won't deliver value to the business. Okay. And then you have to be very careful about scope creep. The scope of a project is, what are the boundaries of this project? Where does it start? Where does it end? What does it include and what does it exclude? So you have to make sure that you understand the scope. So when people are like, oh, I don't know how many of you are familiar with US politics, but a lot of times when they want to sign a bill, when the bill is passed, maybe the bill is called the business analysis bill, and everyone has gone through it. Then before the senators start signing it, people start throwing in all kinds of things in there. They'll throw in things for water, they'll throw in things for electricity, they'll throw in things for social care. And as long as they know that bill is getting signed, even though it's supposed to be for one thing, they'll just keep adding all kinds of things into it. That's why a lot of times the senators will come out and say, oh, I didn't even know that bill contained ABCD, because but before you know, the bill will be so much and will contain all kinds of different things, but you can't allow that to happen to your project. You must understand the boundaries. So if someone wants to introduce something into the project that is not part of the scope, you're like, no, this is beyond the scope. So a lot of times when we're creating documents, we write what is in scope and what is out of scope. So yes, I know you have mentioned all these different things, but they just happen to be out of scope. So you have to make sure that during the delivery of the project, other things don't begin to creep in. It's called project creep. It just, before you know, they start introducing things little by little by little. And then you now find yourself having to rework or extend the project because the scope has been extended. If the scope is to be extended, there are ways to do that. There are change management ways to do that, but it just doesn't happen, on anyone's whim. There's a process for that. Okay. And then you have to establish the clear success criteria. In other words, I don't know how many of you remember the class we had on acceptance criteria. That's what it is. So for every requirement, you have to have acceptance criteria. What do I have to see to show that this requirement has been delivered? It's not just you telling me that it's been delivered. Yes, this is the requirement, but unless I see ABCD, the checklist, then this requirement will not be fully delivered. You can deliver it partially. You can, if you want to over deliver, yeah, well, that's another matter altogether. So what is your clear success criteria? And then you have to have stakeholder buy-in. Remember, your stakeholder is anyone who has interest in the project. We're going to have a whole class on stakeholder management and engagement, or all that entails, because it's a very huge topic on its own and very important, because obviously stakeholders are important to the requirements. BAs, we don't pluck requirements from the air. We get them from stakeholders. If you cannot trace your requirement to a particular stakeholder, then that requirement was not properly elicited. You must know that for every requirement, this is where I got it from. I got it from this particular stakeholder, and that stakeholder should be able to sign off on it and say, yes, it's been approved. I agree. These are my requirements. Go ahead with it. So in order to get that engagement with them, for them to give you the requirement, review it, sign it off, all of that, you need their buy-in. If they tell you, I'm too busy, I'm not interested in this project, I don't really have confidence that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, it's going to be very difficult for you to work with that person. So you're going to have a situation where you encounter some, stakeholder resistance, or you're dealing with, we call them difficult stakeholders or challenging stakeholders, but once you get a stakeholder's buy-in, if they see your email, they'll respond. If you ask them to come for a meeting, they'll respond to you, regardless of how busy they are, because they have confidence in you and in the project. Okay. And again, the requirements on the pin, I've talked about this: accuracy in planning and estimation. Estimation is, now that you've given us the requirements, how much work and how much effort will the developer need to put in to develop it? Will the QA tester need to put in to test and make sure that this requirement was properly delivered? So estimation is very important. You're going to learn more about it in other classes. Okay, so this basically says, when you get the requirements right, you ensure that the whole team builds what the business really needs the first time. Businesses lose so much money because they just go ahead and we know what we want, is fine, it's fine, it's fine. Before you know it, it just goes all wrong in so many different ways. We just know it's going to go wrong, but it could go wrong in so many different ways. And then the business would have lost money. That project will be not fit for purpose. They won't be able to use it. It'll be clunky. People will just be unhappy, and they would have lost money. They won't have gotten value. So a lot of times when you're insisting on the process, you have to remember that you're doing it so that the project team can get it right the first time. Everyone wins, and the business gets what it is they want. So the requirements framework is the approach on how to go about this requirements management. Requirements engineering. It's called requirements engineering, RE. It's really again, everything that you're asked to do is a process. There's a technique for it. There's a way to do it. So don't get overwhelmed or think, I haven't done this thing before, I don't know how to do it. There's a technique for everything. So once you understand the technique, then it's easy to go through that process. And things like this framework help, because you already know that these are the steps you need to go through in order to get the best results. Again, projects are different. It's not one project fits all. You can learn something in a particular place, move to another business, and the project team functions differently. Or even within the same business, you can move from project to project to project. And because the project team is made up of different people, you just function differently. Where I'm working, I moved from the technology business unit to another business unit. And I don't know if it's because it's a technology business unit, but they were a lot more mature. We had a lot of these structures. It was just running like clockwork. But the business unit I moved to was a lot younger and less structured. So I'm having to almost tell people that this is how we do this thing. And they're like, okay, so how do we do this? And I'm like, okay, this is the best way to do it. What do you think? Okay, how do we approach this? Just today, I think we got in a stakeholder to talk to us about finances and creating a business case, because the project manager hadn't done it before. And he was talking about service introduction, all of that. Because I'd been in the previous business, I was like, yeah, I've been through that process. It's really grueling, it's all of that. And after that, the PM was like, okay, then let's talk. Because if you have the information, then, we are in the same team. So tell us within the team what we need to do in order to go through this process. So once you understand this process, even if you are in a team that is not as mature, you can coach them on how to do these things. Tell them this is best practice. And if you, for BAs, work is regulated, like I said, here in the UK and especially around Europe, by the British Computer Society, BCS. They have books and they have, this is how this thing is done. In Canada, in the North America, the US, is the International Institute for Business Analysis, the IIBA. So, and they have like a big babok, so the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge, that's huge. So the techniques are known within the framework, but a lot of project teams may not know it. So when you learn these things during your interview, You're talking to them about, this is the framework, this is requirements engineering, all of that. They know you know what you're talking about. And most of the time, they'll bring you into the team to actually educate their team, because they're like, if we bring someone who knows these things, then it'll be easier. So like I said, the framework is the organized approach on the entire requirements engineering process. Okay, so it is the approach to elicitation, to analysis, documentation, validation, management, all of that. As a BA, you're going to see requirements gathering a lot. Requirements gathering is the previous term that was used before elicitation. Now it's elicitation, because gathering almost feels like, oh, you're just going to go and collect requirements. There's no work. But people that have been in the profession are like, this thing is work. If you're just gathering it, then you're not doing it well. You have to almost draw it out. You have to seek it out. You have to go and meet, find out who the stakeholders are, and then draw the requirements out of them. So you have to elicit it. There's a process of drawing it out. So you're going to see those terms used interchangeably, but elicitation is now the more modern and common way to say requirements gathering, but just know that they're the same thing. So for elicitation, you identify who your stakeholders are, you engage them, and you talk to them about getting their requirements. Your relationship with your stakeholders is an ongoing one. Okay, it's not just for elicitation. You need them for a lot of the different stages. Then you, as a business analyst, you have to analyze the requirements once you get it. Yeah, you have to categorize them, prioritize them, make sure that they're complete, they're clear, that there are no conflicts. If you have two conflicting requirements, you have to go and get clarity. Okay, then there are dependencies. One depends on the other. Unless we do this thing, it's like you're building a house. Unless you build the first floor, you can't build the second floor. Yeah, you can't build the third floor, so on and so forth. So the first floor is the dependency of the second floor. If you're going to build the second floor, it depends on how well you build the first floor. So that's what a dependency is. Two requirements that are linked to each other. Until you have one, you cannot have the other. So when you're prioritizing, you make sure you prioritize the one that needs to come first. Because if you say, okay, these are all the requirements, this one goes first, by the time the developers are developing, they're like, I'm sorry, I can't do what you're asking, because the features or the functionalities that I need in order to do that do not exist. So I can't do that. And it slows up the project and all of that. So be very aware of dependencies, draw them out, identify them, and prioritize them. Documentation is very, very important. There are different ways to document. We'll talk about it. Then validation. When you've documented, you have to go back to the stakeholder to make sure that the way you documented it, what you documented, is clear, is consistent, is complete. This requirement that you have here, is this what you wanted? This is what I documented. Is it correct? So you have to go and validate it with the stakeholders. And then once you do, then they can start building or developing the requirements, and then comes management. So you now have to manage them to make sure that the requirements are updated. If there's anything that, okay, you've done this one, you move it out, this is what is remaining, and then we need to do this one. Once you do it, you move it out again. So there's that evolving nature in management. Okay, so there are different kinds of requirements. Okay, there are loads of different kinds. There are 4 major kinds, but if you notice the image, you see that the 4 major kinds, like I said, are general, technical, functional, and non-functional. But when you look at the what do they call it? When you look at the image, you see that under general, you have different kinds of requirements. Under technical, you have different kinds. Under functional, you have different kinds. Under non-functional, you have different kinds. So for general, these are the high-level business needs. Okay, these are what the business needs. These are the very high level. Okay, these are the specific functionalities that are needed. For technical, again, it's what it says it is. What it relates to the technology, the platforms, the infrastructure. What do we need in? What are the technical requirements? What do we need in order to deliver this thing? What are the technical needs in order? What are the technical needs the business has so that we can deliver the project or the service? Functional is what is the behavior, what is the function, what is the feature, how does it work, how does this system work, if the user how does the user interact with the product or the service. So there has to be a functionality to it, so, and then obviously non-functional ones are the quality attributes of how the system performs. What is the speed like? What is the performance like? What about the security? What about usability? If we say that the system can take 1,000 users at the same time, what happens if there are 5,000? How does the system react to usage? How long is it available? Is it 24 hours or does it have a downtime? So all these things are things that are not really seen, performance requirements that are not really seen, but they're very important because they drive what is seen. If I click on something and the performance is slow, I may not see all the technical non-functional things that go on behind it, but I just know that it's not performing as well as I need for it to. So again, very important. I'm sure you've seen this before, but I no matter how I update my training, I always leave this slide because it is so important. And for those who haven't seen it before, I'll go through it again. So this is, we all know the very popular internet trend, what I ordered versus what I got. Yeah. So this first image is what the customer wanted, how they explained it, is communication. So this is how they explained it. This is what the project leader understood. This is what the engineer designed. This is what the programmer wrote, is code. This is what he wrote. This is how the sales team described it. This is how the project was documented. Now, remember, documentation is a major part of what the BA does. So if this part is empty, that's a BA's responsibility. Where's the documentation? Where's all of it? Where's what we need to get what we need done? So documentation is very important. It says, okay, this is what the operations installed. This is how the customer was built. This is how the help desk supported, and this is actually what the customer really needed. So that's actually what they really needed. Yeah. And remember, documentation drives a lot of all these things. I dare say that if the documentation had been gotten right, a lot of all these other roles would have gotten their own role better. They didn't have anything to work with, so everyone was just kind of going with what they thought was the best. But if the BA had documented it, then everything would have been consistent. You'd have been following one whole set of requirements, and people would know exactly what to deliver. Everybody, remember, these are all your stakeholders, the project leader, the engineer, they're all your stakeholders. So if you have the right requirement, then everybody will be able to use those requirements to do their job. And when they deliver something that is not part of the requirements, you can say, look, we told you these are what the requirement, this is what the requirement was, so you didn't get it right. It's your bad. But if there's no documentation, guess who is going to get, I don't want to say the blame, but BAs, we need to know how to do our job a lot, because if not, we can be scapegoats. They'll just put everything on you. So a lot of times, you know how to do these things for your own protection and benefit. They call it in the corporate world, they call it CYA. You just know how to cover your butt and just make sure you do what you need to do when you need to do it. If anyone asks you for the documentation, you present it. If you need anything, you're like, this, here you go, basically. And then everyone gets to do their role. So like I said, it's very important. Documentation is very, very important. Now, why is the BA important in sorry, we know I've just explained why the BA is important, but I just want to explain a bit more about what your role actually is. Again, BAs, we wear a lot of hats. There's no day that's the same in the life of a business analyst. Your projects are different. What you have to do is different. The people you need to talk to are different. You get to talk to so many different people. Or maybe you get to work in a particular team. Yeah. So if you're working in an agile environment, you may, on behalf of the business, you may interact with the product owner. So the product owner is representing the business, and then you're talking with the product owner. So it differs. Yeah. But again, we wear many different hats, but it's your responsibility to understand what the business vision is and make sure that whatever is delivered meets the business goal. The only way to do it is to get the requirements from the business. That's the only way to do it. There's no other way. It's not rocket science, or it's not magic. What do you want? Articulate what you want. I'm going to talk through some of the kind of questions you need to ask, because if you just say, what do you want? Person will just give you an answer, and then if you don't really know how to ask questions, you may not be able to get the best out of them. I'm hoping you guys remember the exchange, the demo we did for requirements elicitation. I hope you do. But you can watch the video again if you were not there. I'm sure it'll be given to you. But the way you champion the vision is to understand what the vision is, and then make sure you document the requirements to deliver it, and make sure those requirements are delivered. We do that through user acceptance testing, UAT, to make sure that what we asked for is what was delivered. Okay. In a lot of stakeholder discussions, the stakeholders may be talking. You're basically listening. You're very neutral. You don't have any skin in the game, or it's not like you're not forced however they land. You just want them to land. Just at the end of the day, that's what you guys want. Sometimes you're in stakeholders meetings and these guys are just talking, and at the end of the day, you're like, so what requirements have we landed on? Because otherwise they're just talking. So as a BA, you have to be able to facilitate some of these discussions and bring people back so they don't go off on their own tangent. Okay, this is the requirements elicitation workshop. After all you guys have finished talking about, what exactly is the requirement? Could we please draw it out? It sometimes is a bit frustrating if you're not able to facilitate a workshop and people just spend an hour talking and you're not able to get anything, or they just keep throwing ideas around and they don't land on anything, because the fact that people talked about 5 different objectives doesn't mean anything. You have to land on a particular thing. So again, your questions, how you question people, because we may be neutral facilitators, but we facilitate. You're not silent. You're not just a note taker. You have to be able to ask the right questions. If someone is making an assumption, you call it out. If they're going beyond the scope, you bring them back. If they're talking about conflicting priorities, you make sure that you help them negotiate until they arrive on the order of prioritization. You make sure that you're able to get buy-in from the stakeholders. Yeah, so there's a lot that we do. You're not a note taker by any means, at all. You're like I said, you're a bridge. You're the one that translates the goals to concrete needs. You're a facilitator. You lead workshops, interviews, and then you make sure that if there's a conflict, everyone arrives at a consensus. As an analyst, you're able to spot the gaps. There's something missing here. You've given me 1, 2, 3, and they've given me 7, 8, 9. What about the one in the middle? There's something missing, or there are duplications, or there are dependencies that we haven't been able to spot. So you analyze the requirements you get. You document them. You're the author. If you look at a requirements traceability matrix, I'll talk a bit about that. Again, I love business analysis because the names tell you what the function is. It's a requirements traceability matrix. You're able to trace the requirements from its origin to its conclusion. Yeah. So in a requirements traceability matrix, you know who the requirement owner is. So even though you have 100 stakeholders, you should be able to say requirement 23 was from stakeholder number 2. Yeah, this is where I got this requirement from. So every requirement has its own owner, but you're the author. You're the one who documents it. So they will talk to you about it. They could send it to you in a document. We're going to talk about how you elicit requirements. But you as the BA are the author you're the document author. So you write it down. You make sure that it's clearly documented. It's concise. It's understandable in simple language. They could tell you something vague. You have to make sure it's complete. They could tell you something technical. You have to make sure that you're able to translate it into simple language. And then you make sure that you guard the scope. You understand that this is the scope. So when people are bringing other things in, you're like, are we planning to extend the scope? Because if we're not, that is beyond scope. We're going above and beyond the scope of this project. So we know that even though this thing is important that you're talking about, we can add it, but for this particular project, it's not part of our deliverables. I'm so sorry. So if you want to make it part of the deliverables, there's a process, but it's not, we're not just going to sneak it in. So you guard the requirements to make sure that it's still within scope, and then you make sure that everything is traceable from, like I said, origin to delivery. Okay. So, what do good requirements look like? Yeah. By the time you write your requirements, everyone who reads them should understand what it's going to look like when it's complete. So whatever however you want to document your requirement, there are many different ways of documenting requirements. Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about it. But by the time you document it and you show the stakeholders, they have to understand what complete looks like, what done looks like, what good looks like. Yeah, if we are finished with the project and it doesn't look like we agreed it was going to look, then there's a problem. So you have to find out what the problem is. Yeah. And then when you have clear requirements, no wasted time, everyone goes straight to work. Yeah. A lot of times people have ideas on how they think a project should work. Yeah, you've been in the project for 1,000 years. Good on you. But for this project, I'm so sorry, that great idea you have, we can't sneak it in. We have a limited amount of time to deliver what we want to deliver. So no unnecessary features. No, it doesn't matter how great it is, how innovative it is. There's a process to bring it into the project. We've gone through all of that. This is what we agreed the project is going to deliver. So great idea and all of that. But for purposes of this project, it's not part of it. So you don't waste time on any of those things. Okay. You understand what what your measurement for success is. Remember, you have your acceptance criteria. You have your KPI. The KPI is key performance indicator. You know that by the time we're done with this thing, this is how we're going to measure success. This is how we're going to know that we've done well, because most projects, when they've delivered it, they want to measure its success. They want to see how well it's doing. If it's not doing well, then you may have delivered everything you need to deliver, but it didn't just perform the way we thought it would perform. But in order to do that, you need to know how it performs anyway. So there's even performance analysis as well, but that's another thing altogether. But you have to understand what you're measuring. What do I want to measure? So those are your key performance indicators. And of course, we've talked about acceptance criteria. We're going to talk about it again. And then you have to keep your stakeholders engaged. Okay. If someone says, I want to build a particular house, most of the time they don't just leave the architect and the builders and go away and they'll come back when the thing is done. No, they check in from time to time. How does this look? Have you done this particular thing? How is the foundation? How are the walls? How's the window? How is this? How is that? How tall is the building? The stairs. Your stakeholders check in. So you have to keep them engaged to make sure that, they check in regularly. And in the agile framework, you do that regularly. Now when you're on the internship, you're going to have, for every sprint, your sprint ends with a demo. So you demo what you've done in that sprint. You've had 2 weeks, you had the requirements, you have the team to deliver, you had the team to test, and then by the time you're done, this is the value we're supposed to do. This is our sprint goal. This is our sprint mandate. Then you have your demo in front of the stakeholders and you show them what you've done for that sprint. And then, you keep adding on for each sprint. That's incremental value. For every sprint, you add on value. For every sprint, you add on value. So you have to keep your stakeholders engaged, okay? Now we're going straight into elicitation because that's where it starts. It starts with the elicitation process. And like I had said before, the elicitation process is the requirements elicitation process is a process of finding out exactly what your project needs. So it is very important. It's the start of the requirements life cycle, and it is very, I won't say it's the most important, but it's very, very important. Okay, so you have to understand how to elicit requirements, because the quality of your requirements is the quality of the project, as I've already explained before. So it's important you understand how to elicit. What kind of questions do you ask? What are your techniques? Remember, I said that's why anyone can be a BA. They tell you what to do, they tell you how to do it. So no one's ever going to leave you on your own as a BA. For everything you're asked to do, there's a way to do it. There's a method to do it. There's a tool to do it. So you know what your skills are, what your tools are, what your competencies are, what your techniques are. All these things are important. So for the requirements elicitation process, it's the how do I get out the requirements from the different stakeholders. Yeah. And it starts first by identifying who are your stakeholders. A stakeholder for a particular project is anyone who has a stake in that project. They hold stakes in the project, so they are stakeholders. They have an interest. They have a part to play. They're either a beneficiary, or they're the ones driving it, or they're the ones providing you with the information you need, or they're the ones sponsoring it. They're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the budget. So or they're the regulators to make sure that you do what you're supposed to do. They're the customers who are going to enjoy it. They're the staff who are going to use that thing for their work. So there are loads of different kinds of stakeholders, but for every project, you have to identify who your stakeholders are. There's a process for doing that as well, and then obviously process for ranking. Yeah, they call it ranking your stakeholder. So who is your most influential, most powerful, most interested? Who has the most power? Who has the most influence? Who's more interested? All those sorts of things. There are ways to do that. We'll deal with that with stakeholder management as well. So you have to identify who your relevant stakeholders are. Then you have to know what your project goals and objectives are. Yeah. So these two things are things you have to have at the start of the project. Who are the stakeholders? What are the business needs? Because those two things are important. And then you elicit the requirements for the stakeholders. You document your requirements. You go back to verify the requirement. I just put confirm here, but the term is validate or verify. Yeah. In fact, verify and validate means two separate things. You prioritize. As a BA, this last one is important. We do not make assumptions. We don't make assumptions. We don't make assumptions. You ask questions. Never assume anything. Always ask, confirm, double check, go back again and get the information you need. You never assume. For every requirement you document, you must be able to say, this is where I got it from. If you cannot say that, you've made an assumption. It doesn't matter how good you are as a BA. Your every requirement must be linked to a stakeholder. So that is very important as well. Don't make assumptions. It doesn't matter how old you've been or how experienced you are. And one of the things I've noticed a lot, I'm really glad this forum has a lot of us, yeah, not just Black, but a lot of Africans, yeah, there, or people with, an African background or heritage. A lot of times we're so reluctant to ask questions. We think that it makes us look stupid or silly or not knowledgeable. If you know the kind of questions people ask, sometimes I'm like, Jesus, did you just ask me that question? People ask you questions they've asked you 1,000 times. And I'm like, but I'm not understanding. Why are you asking me all these questions? They are not afraid. They will ask anything. Someone has been in the business for 10 years. They're still asking, so where is this particular document? Where is this? But we will just like knuckle under and like, let me not ask questions so I won't look stupid. No, you don't want to do that. Ask, especially as a BA. You must ask questions. People expect BAs to ask questions. If you're working with a good team, maybe a good project manager or a good PO, they'll prompt you to ask questions, especially if they know that you're new to the team or new to the business unit or new to the organization. But you as a BA, the more experience you get, you don't wait for people to prompt you. You just ask questions. There's nothing too stupid. It doesn't matter how small. It doesn't matter how you think, you don't know. So you ask. But the one thing I try to do for my own sanity and for other people is I don't want to ask the same question twice. If you've given me the information, I won't go back to you. If I don't know that thing and I've never asked it, I will not hesitate. But if I've asked it before and you've given me the information, I don't want to go and ask twice because you tire your stakeholders. They're like, now, but how far? I've answered this thing. This person is only going to take my time and ask me the same things over and over again. So as a BA, because we're not machines, and like I said, a lot of these stakeholder workshops or interviews, people are talking. It doesn't matter how good you are with writing things down. You can never match the speed with which a person talks, unless you're a stenographer or something like that, But as a normal person who has not, you can't be listening and be writing and be listening and be writing and be asking questions and be doing all of that. So what we normally do is record our elicitation sessions, yeah, but you don't record without asking for permission. So again, that's another thing. I just, if people are too busy talking in the chat, does anyone mind if I record this, or if I can get a word in edgewise? Guys, I'm going to record this session. Do you guys mind if I record this session? I'll need to record this. I'll just find a way to let them know I'm going to start recording. And I need to record the session, obviously. And I record the session and I have the notes. Now we have AI to give you meeting notes. And you can ask AI, could you tell me what the feedback or next steps from these things are? It will just break down what you need. It's so easy, So in all those things, all these tools make our work easier. But you have to know that you need to record that session and you have to know the information you need. So you're asking the right questions, and then you just let them know. Even after a particular session, it may be 30 minutes, it may be an hour, it may be 2, it may be a day. You may not have gotten everything you need. You just let them know, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated it. I'm going to organize additional meetings. I'm going to come back to you again if I need more information. You just let them know. I'm going to come back to you again. I'll document what you said, but I'm going to come back to you again. And I'm going to keep working with you because you're the same person who is going to refine this requirement. You're the same person who's going to sign off on this requirement, and so on and so forth. So you're going to interact with your stakeholders for a while. So it's really good for you to have a very good relationship with them. So relationship building is very important as well. All right. So again, I think I mentioned this in the beginning. Yeah. The elicitation and analysis process is circular. Like it goes in a circle. Yeah. So it's cyclical. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, it keeps going round. It's not linear. It's not just a straight thing. It goes round and comes back again and goes round and comes back again. Yeah. So even if you're saying that because there are different ways to elicit requirements. In some projects, you can say, okay, we want to elicit all the requirements before we start the project. And then in some other projects, you're like, we're going to do it bit by bit by bit. Most of the time, if you're working in a waterfall, if you're working on a project that is using the waterfall approach, one step follows the other. So they won't start the project until you've gotten all the requirements. But in a project that is following the agile approach, or an agile project, most of the time you get your requirements in bit by bit by bit. So you get the requirement you need for that particular sprint, and then you refine it, approve it, the team is working, you go back to the PO, you get your requirement again, you approve it, you commit it, go back again. Okay. So elicitation goes through analysis. If there are any gaps and questions, you go back to elicitation. Oh, I have a question about the requirements you've given me. Can I confirm ABCD with you? You go back, you validate them back and forth. So a lot of times it can be cyclical. It can just keep going round and round, and you do it until you're done, depending on, like I said, the approach. And then apart from waterfall and agile, there's the hybrid. So you can be doing both, like half agile, half waterfall, or you can be using like a different methodology as well. So depending on how your project is structured, yeah, you can that depends on the process, how you're going to work through elicitation, but it's usually never one and done. You usually have to go back again, elicit, analyze, validate, elicit, analyze, and all of that before you even go into management and all of that. So yeah, that's very important. Now, there are different stages of requirement elicitation. Okay, so you have to understand why. Remember, a requirement is driven by a business need or a business goal. And that's usually because there's a pain point or an opportunity behind it. So the business is suffering a particular pain. The business process has a bottleneck. There's a process that is not really, it needs to be improved. The people that are working there, let me give an example. There is the admin team of a particular business could be manually entering data. Yeah, they're just entering data. When they manually enter the data, they now have to, move that same data into another application and type that data in again. So they're double keying, or maybe sometimes triple keying, depending on how many. Maybe one system has to do with scheduling the employee, what do they call it? Employee days, their work days. Yeah, another one has to do with payroll, another one has to do with HR. And so in order to do that, maybe if they want to talk about, okay, these are the days the employee is working, they'll write it. Then for HR, they'll write it, so HR will know, okay, this is how many annual leave days that this employee needs because they're working on so many hours. And then payroll knows, okay, either they're salaried or they get paid by hour. This is how much we need to pay them. So you have one admin person who is triple keying the same information. Uzo Okezi, she works, as a BA, and she works for 20 hours, and then she's a full-time staff, or maybe she's contract, and you go to HR, you put in it is, gosh, if that was your job, it would be so mind-numbing. You're putting in the same information into 3 different applications. That it's not efficient, it's a time waster, it's a pain for the person who needs to do it. So the business need would be, how can we automate this system so that the admin person will key in that information into one particular application. That application is integrated with HR and will feed the information to HR. HR is connected to payroll, and they go on to payroll, and then payroll pays them. So you have one instance of the employee keying one information, but because the process is automated and the systems are integrated, they all talk to each other. That's all they need to do, and everyone gets to do their job. HR sees the information they need, they're able to do their job. Payroll sees the information, they're able to do their job. So in order to do that, you have to understand the pain points behind that requirement, because they'll just tell you, oh, we need to automate a particular process. That's all they'll tell you. This project is to automate this process, because in order to do that, there's a lot that has to happen. You have to have API keys. You have to make sure that you're able to integrate with one another. There's a lot. So the project can just be automating a manual process. That's all they'll tell you. But you as a BA, you now have to find out, okay, this particular process, what is the pain behind it? What is the need? What is the business need? What is the benefit behind it? That will drive a lot of things. Imagine if the stakeholder is like, I don't understand why you are doing all these things. You're wasting money. Then you as a BA will say, this is the business need. If we do this thing that we want to do and we deliver on this project, imagine how much time will be saved. Three hours will be, the work will be halved, or what they call it, like reduced by a third. That's a huge time saver. That's efficiency. That's productivity. The business will be able to do so much better. That person will be able to do a lot more with their time. The business will be able to run more efficiently. There's so much value you can get from that simple thing of automating a manual process. Yeah. So you have to understand the pain behind it. As a BA, people are going to talk to you a lot about the language of their role. So even as a BA, there are terms we use. When you use certain terms, I know you're a BA. I know you understand the role and you understand the whole project. You know how the project works. So people who use not everyone who uses the language knows, but if you know it, you use the language. Yeah. But sometimes it can be very ambiguous. For example, you guys are going to use Azure DevOps. You'll be given access to it. That's our project management application that we use for our projects. Yeah. A user story on Azure DevOps is called a product backlog item. You will get to know why. So for a PBI for short, you have epic, you have features, you have PBIs. Yeah. There's a very popular data analysis application called Power BI. People that use Power BI call it PBI. Imagine bringing these two people into the room. Someone is saying, "Oh, I'll use PBI." Okay, no, I'll use PBI. They're talking is PBI, but they're both saying different things. This person's PBI refers to Power BI. This person's PBI refers to product backlog item. And everyone's like, "I'm sorry, there's there's a break in transmission. There's something happening here that we're not really understanding each other. We're talking, but we're not communicating." So you have to make sure that if there's any ambiguity in any of the words you're using to document your requirement or whatever, you make sure that you eliminate it. I spoke to you about using a glossary. Yeah. You need a glossary. If you haven't done it, I'm not sure why you haven't. Go online, research glossaries for projects. Some people just write the name and write the definition. A lot of times there is a more professional format, it's just more, it's more, it looks better, yeah, that you can use. But please have a glossary so that as you're learning these languages or learning these words, your what do they call it? Personal glossary, your jargon buster, that's what some people call it. You're documenting the new words and the definition, but each project also needs a glossary. So when we're in this project and we say PBI, we mean Power BI. We don't mean product backlog item, or vice versa. When we say MVP, we mean minimum viable project, whatever it is you're saying. Yeah. When we say NHS, we mean North Hospital system. We don't mean national, NHS for British Health. NHS means something different within this project than it does outside. So you have to make sure that there is no ambiguity in your language. Okay. Then you have to identify corner cases. They're called edge cases. Yeah. A lot of times when you're writing requirements, the main requirement is very easy to identify, but then you have to identify all the possible scenarios that could happen, either in a good way or in a not so good way. So for example, we have a login process, or let me say payment process. Yeah. The system is set up in such a way that if someone goes on, they put things in their carts, they write, they select what it is they want. Once they're done with that, they click on basket, they can see their basket. Then when they click on checkout, they're able to either add a card or connect the payments portal to their bank, and then their bank verifies it, blah 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 blah, and they pay and blah blah blah. So that's a main process. That's a desired process. It's called the happy path. It's done. Everybody's happy. Everything went well. What are the unhappy parts? And so it could be you try to pay with a card. Maybe that card is not one of the cards that is accepted by that portal, We only accept debit cards. We don't accept credit cards. Or we only accept credit cards. We don't accept debit cards. You happen to have a debit card and this only accepts credit card. That's an unhappy path. What do? I'm not able to pay. What if you don't have sufficient money in your account? What happens then? What if your bank gives you an OTP, a one-time password or something to use to authenticate that you're the right user, and you don't use it on time or something? There's so many different things that could go wrong. There's so many unhappy paths. In order to write a complete user story for that payment process, you have to be able to think through or talk through all the possible scenarios, identify them and document them. So you go to the payment SME, the person who is responsible, who is knowledgeable, and you ask them questions. Okay, I do ABCD. You ask them, what if I don't put in the right password? What happens? What if I don't put in the right bank details? What happens? What if you keep asking them all these questions, and you're able to identify all the possible things that could go wrong, all the corner edge cases, document it all. Make sure that your user stories are robust and all your use cases or possible scenarios are well documented, so the testers can test to make sure that it goes the way it's supposed to go. So you don't find people that are angry texting you or calling you because I've just finished putting all my products in the cart and I wasn't able to pay because your system doesn't do ABCD, whatever. So now you write your user stories. That's self-explanatory. We're going to have a whole class on writing user stories. As a BA and as a product team, project team, but as a BA, I'm going to tell you why I said project team, and I'm going to tell you why I said the BA. You have to have a definition of ready and a definition of done. So it's DOR and DOD. They go hand in hand. I know this just says DOD, but yeah, there is DOR as well. So as a project team, you have to define what is the team's definition of ready and the team's definition of done. And as a BA, you must define it as well. It can be the same as your team, but your team works with your DOR and DOD, and the BAs work with DOR and DOD. Why? Because your product owner has to know what your DOR is and your DOD is. Because if you've already said that in order for your user story to be done or ready to be committed to the project, it has to have 1, 2, 3. If that user story doesn't have 1, 2, 3, maybe it has 1, 2, or it has 1 and 3, it doesn't have 2, your product owner will not approve it, because until your product owner approves it, it will not go into the approved column and it will not be worked on by the project. You will understand all these things a bit later. So please watch this video after you have a number of different classes. Maybe after your week 1 and week 2, you have a lot more classes and you're going to learn a lot more of what I'm talking about. So rewatch this video again so you can understand some of these things we're talking through. Okay. So now these are some elicitation techniques. Yeah. Remember, I told you that every process as a business analyst has its techniques, it has its tools, and all of that. So these are some of the techniques. There's document analysis. You come onto a project, they give you documents. From those documents, you will be able to draw out, elicit what some of the requirements are. What is your project goal? What is the business need? What are we supposed to deliver? Remember, we talked about epics, we talked about features, we talked about, so you can decipher some of the epic features from some documents. You may go onto a project and you don't have a single document. They just greenfield project, new, nothing. They just tell you go there and do stuff. So you don't have any document. You're the one to create the document. So that means document analysis is not a technique that you'll be using at that stage. I'm not saying you're never going to use it, but at that stage, you may not have anything. Then there's observation. You watch people do their job. As you're watching them, you're able to understand what the process is. Yeah. There's interview, very, very common, where once you've identified your stakeholders, you set up calls with them and you talk to them and you interview them, ask the right questions, open-ended questions, what they call it now, like probing is the word I'm looking for, probing questions to be able to elicit the requirement from the stakeholder. Then you have workshops. Yeah. Remember, all these are different techniques and there are different times to use them. So you have a workshop. A workshop can be multiple stakeholders at the same time. Maybe you have a lot of different people to talk with and you can put all of them in a room. You may have a lot of different stakeholders and it may not be beneficial to bring all of them together, but sometimes it may be beneficial to bring all of them together and then have like a workshop, maybe half a day, and all the different stakeholders are talking through what their requirements are. So it could be that as well. There's prototyping, brainstorming. These are just a few. There are a number of other elicitation techniques as well. Prototyping is you're creating a model of what the requirement is or what the product or service is. Yeah, so they can have like a visual representation. Brainstorming, a lot of us are very used to brainstorming. You haven't really landed on the solution yet. People are still talking through, will this work? How about this? Will this work? How about that? You know, people are just like suggesting and, you know, putting forth different suggestions. Okay, now, so we've gone to documentation. Once you've elicited the requirements, you now have to document it. And it's important. Remember that blank space for documentation. You don't ever want that. You need to be able to document. You need to capture, organize the business requirements. Okay, so very good documentation requires numbering. Each requirement has to have its own unique identifier. Yeah, because you have to be able to know what is being moved, what is being worked on. It's very good for traceability. Okay, again, we're going to talk about that. We've talked about user stories. We're going to talk about it a bit more. Acceptance criteria, process maps, use cases, wireframes, requirements catalog, requirements traceability matrix. Okay, we know what a user story is, your acceptance criteria. I've talked to you about that. We're going to have a class on user story and acceptance criteria. Process map is what it says on the box. You identify a process and you map it out, and it's a visual representation of a process. That's another class that you're going to learn and you are also going to do. Remember, you learn and you do. So we're going to give you Visio, which is the process mapping tool that we use, and we're going to train you on how to use it, and then you're going to create process maps for the project you're working on. Same thing with use cases, same thing with your wireframes. Remember when I was talking about user stories, I mentioned wireframes. So we're going to teach you how to use Balsamiq, which is a low fidelity wireframing tool. We're going to teach you how to do that because your user stories need acceptance criteria and they need wireframes, and we're going to explain why. Okay, and then you have your requirements catalog, a document that holds your requirements, and I've talked about the requirements traceability matrix, another document where you can map out or document the requirements from start to end. It's mainly used, mainly used in either a waterfall or a hybrid, mainly waterfall project. For Agile, for Azure DevOps, there's a lot of functionality on the page. A lot of the traceability can be done on the page. So there's really no need to do a requirements traceability matrix with an Agile project, but it's good for you to know how to use it. So we're going to ask you to do it anyway, but it's good for you to know how to use it because a lot of organizations may not even use Azure, or they may not know how to use Azure. So you can find they have Azure DevOps there, but they're also asking you to do a requirement traceability matrix so they can follow it. Meanwhile, they can follow it on Azure DevOps, but because they're not really used to it, they'll still tell you, still give us the matrix. So it'll be good to have that requirement as well, just to know how to do it. Okay. Observation. Remember, I said that these are techniques for elicitation. Okay, so there are different kinds: formal observation, protocol analysis, and shadowing. Formal observation is just you're watching the person do the thing. Yeah, and you can watch them and be asking them, okay, so why do you do it this way? So how about this one? What about this? What about that? You know, you can watch them and then document it as they're doing it. So it's a good way to interact with the users as they're performing the tasks or going through the processes. And while they're doing it, you're documenting it as well. Then there's the protocol analysis. Okay, you're just basically saying, okay, this person does a particular job or they perform a particular process. Talk me through what you do, right? So you're not really watching them, but they're talking you through what they do. And then there's shadowing. So you're basically literally following someone and watching them do what they do. Yeah. So it's there's so many different ways to observe. Okay, workshop. Remember, I told you that that's a kind of elicitation technique. And during the workshops, you can brainstorm, you can do a round robin discussion. So basically, you know that groups are formed with a lot of different people. Yeah, you have to identify, especially when you have a workshop, you have to identify who the stakeholders are in the room, understand the different dynamics in the room. So, for example, you can have in a workshop, you can have a senior stakeholder and you can have a junior stakeholder. Now, because the senior stakeholder is in his position of power or whatever, he's more vocal. And then, even though the junior stakeholder has something valuable to add, because the senior stakeholder is there, they're not talking because they don't want to be seen as, being rude or contradicting them or something. So this person has very important, the senior stakeholder may know what we want to achieve, but they don't know how. It's a person that does the job, the junior stakeholder who actually knows how to do the job, but he may not talk because he's in the presence of the senior, his oga or his oga's oga, and he's feeling intimidated or whatever reason. But you need the information he has. It could be cultural. In someone's culture, it's rude to talk when a senior person is talking. So there's a cultural thing. There's so many different factors. When you have so many different stakeholders together in a workshop, you have to understand the people you're bringing in, sometimes even understand their personality. So a round robin discussion is a technique to use to get everybody to talk. And basically what that is Ogali, what do you think? When Ogali finishes talking, she asks Rosemary, she calls on Rosemary, the next person. So by the time you do all of that, you go round the conference room, everybody must talk. And because the people have to talk, then they'll say what they have to say. You can even use that opportunity to ask them questions. So that way, you're not just waiting for the room dynamic for people to just speak up. You actually get them to talk and get the information you want out of them. So round robin is a very good way to do that. Then there's brain writing, same way that there's brainstorming. The difference is, people are calling things out. Someone is writing it. Brain writing, people are just writing things out. You can give everyone post-it notes and get everyone to just write their suggestions. Maybe again, they don't want to be vocal. They don't want to talk. They're feeling shy, whatever. And just write it down. Just write down your thoughts. You may make it anonymous so nobody knows who wrote what. Just write your ideas down. You just want their ideas. You want to know what they have, the knowledge they have. That's all. So you're finding different ways to get it out of them. Okay. Sticky notes, I've mentioned that. Breakout rooms. Sometimes round robin is not enough. The mere presence of somebody there may be enough. Maybe the person wants to talk about something that is not a pain point. And they feel like the organ may feel like, the boss may feel like they're being critical. So even though they have valuable information and you call them up in a round robin, they still may not talk. So you may need to have a breakout to say, okay, why don't we break out in different groups? This team go here, this team go here, this team go here. And teams are more likely to be vocal because they work with each other. So they're familiar with each other. Because in a workshop, you can bring different teams together and then that changes the dynamic of the room. So you may like, if we put everybody in a particular room, we don't have enough time to go through everything. Why don't we split them into 5 groups? So each group is simultaneously giving me requirements. So by the time I finish, rather than having, everybody together in a room and we're not able to maximize the time, you get 5 times as much output. Again, a lot of work, but you have to do what you have to do. So interviews, I've talked about it. But with interviews are one of the most common ways for eliciting requirements. Yeah. But you can have an interview that is wasted. You have to know how to ask questions in order to get the right information out of the interviews. Yeah. So you have to prepare. what exactly do I want to get out of this interview? What information? Who am I talking to? Are they the right people? Sometimes we have interviews, and the first thing we say is, are we talking to the right people? So this is the project. This is what we want. Are you the one to give us that information? Oh, yes, you're talking to the right people. Oh, no, 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 no. There's someone else you need to talk to. In fact, what I do most of the time, just so I'm not wasting time, is in the invite, I will actually list out what the meeting is about. And then at the bottom, I'm like, if there is anyone you think whose opinion or input will be valuable for this meeting, please forward this invite to them so they can come. And you see people forwarding invites to people. So you invite 3 people. At the end of the day, you can get 7 people in that meeting because they know that in order to get the information from them, they are going to need ABCD, who is more knowledgeable, who is a subject matter expert. Then they'll invite that other person. So that usually happens as well. And even when you come for the interview, you can still ask the question just to make sure we're talking to the right people. This person said we should talk to you. Are you the right person? You know, I talked to you so and so, and they recommended that I talk to you as well, that you have additional information. Should I go ahead? Are you familiar with the project? Would you like an overview? Are you the right person I need to talk to? And even when they say yes, they are, then you have to ask them the right questions. And in business analysis, we have something called the 5 whys, not just in business analysis, it's business generally. But yeah, it's 5 whys. So why, what, who, when, where. So these are some of the questions. Why are we doing this project? What is the project about? Who is responsible for such and so? Who is the beneficiary? When do you need this done by? Where are we doing this? Do you understand? So all these are very good question types to ask to make sure that you get the right responses. Okay, so as we all know, you're dealing with people, and because you're dealing with different stakeholders, elicitation can be really challenging for so many different reasons. It's very important, to be honest with you, but it can be very challenging. Okay, if you look at the image, it says, okay, as an analyst, I need to know what you want. What do you want? Yeah. So you're the business owner. So what do you want? And then the business owner says, I want you to design the software for me. And the analyst says, but what do you want to do with the software? You know, I don't know. I don't know until, oh, sorry, I think I'm doing it the wrong way. Okay. So sorry, the bubble is the other way around. Okay, so it says I don't know until you tell me what the software can do. So the analyst is saying, what do you want the software to do? And the business is saying, you tell me what the software can do. The analyst is like, I can design the software to do anything. And the business is like, can you design the software to tell me what the requirements are? You need the requirements, and the person is like, okay, so just design the software for me. And I'm like, okay, so what do you want the software to do? I don't know what you want me to I don't know what you want, what the software will do until you design it for me. So if you tell me what I need to design, I can do anything. Just tell me what you want. The person is like, okay, just design the software to tell me what the requirements are. So it's a humorous way of basically highlighting some of the challenges you can face when you're eliciting requirements as a business analyst. Yeah. So there are many different reasons for it. Yeah. Some people know how to do a job, but they don't know how to tell you. They don't know how to describe what they're doing, which is where things like observation and shadowing are very important. They've been doing this job for years. If you tell them, tell me about what you do, they're like, I just do my job now. Okay, so how do you do I just key it in. So what exactly do you key in? I don't know what you want from me. They're not able to articulate what they do or describe it. So if that's the case, most of the time, you just watch them and get the information you need. Yeah. And then sometimes when they're describing it to you, they're used to it so much that they may skip some vital parts. So you now have to be the one to make sure you're able to document the process properly. Domain complexity. Remember, I said a business analyst can walk into any business and using the competencies and the skills we know, we're able to do our job. But that doesn't mean it's easy. There are some domains or industries or businesses that are very, very, very technical. So it will take some time. You can do it all, but it will take some time for you to understand how that business works before you're able to actually get value from it. Yeah. So sometimes you have some people that they have domain knowledge already. You have someone with a medical degree and they become medical business analysts because they understand the complexities of that domain very well. You have people that are business analysts that just work in the payments industry. They work in the financial sector. They've been there for so long that they understand exactly what to do. I have a very good friend who only works on SharePoint projects for more than 10 years, just SharePoint. And he's in such high demand because he understands that domain back to front. He'll be telling you what needs to happen. So people hire him not just as a business analyst, but as a domain specialist. So there's domain complexity. It doesn't mean that if I go to work on SharePoint, I can't get out of it. I can work into a SharePoint project, but he has already, because of his domain knowledge, he'll work faster than I will. I need time to understand that domain before I can do my job. He already understands the domain, so he's able to just literally hit the ground running, and he knows what to do. Okay, so changing context, things could change. Availability and engagement, you may find that the stakeholders you need to talk to are not available. In that case, what do? There's so many interview questions that are like this, that are just basically asking you, so have you ever dealt with a difficult stakeholder? How did you handle it? Do you understand? And sometimes difficulty can be in unavailability. They were just not there. They keep telling you, you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to this person. You go to go and schedule a meeting with the person's calendar is blocked out all the way to 3 weeks. Meanwhile, you have to deliver your project in 2 weeks. How? So you now start looking for how to get to the person. What are alternatives? So all these things make it challenging. The person says, I can give you 30 minutes. 30 minutes is not even enough to give the person a proper overview of the project for you to elicit their requirements. So it's not enough time when they give you the time, but you just have to work with what you have to work with. Then obviously language and jargon. I've already told you a tool you can help with that. You have your nifty glossary or jargon buster. Now, these are some challenges in elicitation and some of the mitigation strategies for them. In a lot of interviews, I put this slide for a very important reason. Like I said, I've delivered this course before, but this is a new slide because a lot of interview questions come with, have you ever dealt with challenging what challenging situation have you dealt with when it comes to requirements elicitation? And it's usually one or more of these things. Yeah. When you have vague requirements, how do you deal with it? I talked about asking probing questions, applying 5 whys. You have conflicting stakeholder needs. 2 stakeholders have different requirements and they conflict with one another. How do you resolve that? I was actually asked that question in one of my interviews as well. So you prioritize. There are ways to mitigate these challenges. The fact that you face these challenges don't mean that your hands are tied. There are ways to facilitate to mitigate them. And you can do it by prioritization workshops. You use the Moscow. I talked about that. That's your prioritization tool. So which one is your must-have? I know these requirements are conflicting, but of these 2 requirements, which one is the most important one? Which one is your must-have? Which one is your should-have? Which one is your could-have? Which one is your won't-have? Even though both of them are must-haves, which one is a dependency on the other? There are different ways to prioritize. Yeah. Or you have, you understand who your senior stakeholder is, maybe the project sponsor, or who has the most influence and the most power of those 2 stakeholders. Yeah, they have conflicting needs, but one person has more influence. So it may be that you use that to ascertain who is the decision maker in that particular scenario. And then obviously you have a RACI matrix. We're going to talk to you about that as well. You have missing requirements. How do you deal with that? You have domain jargon. I've talked about your glossary that you share with all your stakeholders. You have busy, unavailable stakeholders. There are ways to deal with that. Maybe you're working with a cross-functional team that are offshore. Some of them may be in different parts of the world, in Spain, the United States, you're in Canada, or you're in the UK, or they're in India, or they're in another part of Asia, you have to, find a way to do all these things. Like I said, these are some mitigation strategies. You have resistance to change. Some people don't want to change what they're doing. There are ways to basically go around that as well, on over reliance on a single source of truth. Sometimes you may need the perspective of multiple subject matter experts. Yeah, you can't rely on just one. It's a very complex system that have multiple perspectives, and you have to take all of that in. So you cannot rely on one person's perspective, because if not, you will not have a well-rounded understanding of that particular requirement or application. So you have to understand all your stakeholders, make sure you're able to elicit the requirements from all of them, so you can get like a complete set of requirements. Okay, these are some elicitation questions you can ask. Remember, I talked about question asking. You have to ask questions as the BA. If you finish an elicitation process and you didn't ask a question, I don't know what to say to you. And you can't say, oh no, there's no question to ask. There's always a question to ask. Always. Just you sometimes just have to, task yourself to think like a BA. It's a skill as well, but don't be satisfied just keeping quiet in an elicitation process. Don't do that. Always ask yourself, what question can I ask? Sometimes you're thinking of a question, someone else asked the question, fine, they've asked that question. What's the next question? So don't be silent. I remember something Deji always says, that when you work, visibility is very important. The fact that you're doing your job quietly and putting your head down may not be the best thing for you. You may need to show, people may need to know that you're good at your job, and that requires visibility, and that requires you being able to speak. So don't hide or be quiet, or just, even if you're 10 people in the room, always talk. Ask a question. There's no such thing as a stupid question, but like I said, make sure you don't ask the same question twice. Okay, so these are just some questions to ask. What's the core function, especially when it comes to IT? What's the core function of this feature? Yeah, what outcome are we trying to achieve? What are the key components? What are the next steps? What needs to be completed before? We talked about dependencies. What needs to happen next? Yeah, what needs to happen before? What needs to happen next? What if this happens? Then what happens next? So remember our different use cases and scenarios, edge cases, calling them out. What if this happens? What if that happens? So you ask those kind of questions and you get people talking. They're probing questions, open-ended questions. Don't ask yes or no questions, because they'll just tell you yes or no, and they'll keep moving. Yeah, so these kinds of questions are really important. So for documentation, there are different kinds of documentation. Again, we talked about, I've already explained why we need it. Now, there's the business requirements document, which captures your high-level requirements. There's the FRD, which captures your functional requirements. Then there's a user stories and acceptance criteria, which is agile friendly, very, very granular. And that's a simple, complete, and testable. Yeah. And that's the one we're going to use for this session. Okay. So best practices for clarity. Yeah. Remember, I've said this before, it sits at the heart of every successful project. Okay. So you have to make sure that your requirements are smart. They have to be specific. Don't use technical terms that people don't understand, that are ambiguous, and then make sure that you can trace your requirements. So map out each one from the origin to its conclusion. Your conclusion includes test cases. Okay. So feedback and review. I'm coming to the end of my class. It's been a long one, so if you have questions, get them ready. So for review, yeah, remember I told you that once you document your requirements, they need to be reviewed. So once you've documented them, you can walk through them with your stakeholders. Yeah. you have your elicitation meeting, you can have your refinement meeting where you go through the requirements and your stakeholder says, yes, no, change this, change that, add this here, do all of that. You didn't document this. Oh, no, take that out, all of that. Again, it depends on, we're going to talk about stakeholder management again. It depends on you knowing your stakeholders. There's some people that are happy to, you bring them into the meeting and you guys walk through it together. Sometimes you can send it to them and say, could you go through this, review it, and then let me know what you need to change. And then they'll send you back, they will highlight their changes, blah, 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 blah. So it depends on the stakeholder and how they like to work. Okay. And then once they're done with that, then they approve it. For your agile project, the approval is moving it into the approval column. Yeah, but for some of these ones, you could have a matrix where the stakeholder would say approved, approved, approved. But a lot of times for traceability, we usually get them to send an email to say, I approve, I sign off on it, I'm happy with it, all of that. You need, as BAs, remember, we don't make assumptions and we don't allow people make assumptions on our behalf. So yeah, it's fine, I'm happy with it, oh, it's great. Could you please send an email or could you respond to this email just stating that you're happy with it and blah, blah, blah. In some areas, that email, they'll clip it and add it to the file for that requirement to make sure that there is an approval next to the actual requirements. Yeah, but that's done on Azure DevOps very easily. Then another review process is prototyping or proof of concept. So once they've approved it, you're like, okay, let me quickly show you what it looks like. Is this correct? Which is where wireframe comes in, all your story mapping and all those different kinds of artifacts. They're very, very important for your review and feedback process. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I have one more slide that will give you a bit of insight as to how we're going to work in the process, but I'm pretty much finished. I just have one more slide. But before I do that, are there any questions? I know there's a lot of information you've heard, but if there are any questions, this is the time for it.
Hi, Uzo.
Yeah, hiya.
Thank you very much for today.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate. I think there are some questions on the chat box.
Okay, let me stop sharing so I can look at it. Okay, so when eliciting requirements from stakeholders, how long should a requirements gathering workshop typically last? It depends. Yeah, it depends. How much do you need? Now, a lot of times workshops are massive undertakings because you're bringing in a lot of different stakeholders. So you want to get the most out of it. So a lot of times workshops are usually, they last for a chunk of time. We're talking either half a day, a whole day. Sometimes you can have workshops week. So we have a day for this workshop, we have the next workshop the next day, and so on. It depends. Sometimes you're working for a big organization and you need to talk to many different business units and you need to bring them in, or sometimes the same business unit needs to come back and the project is a bit complex and you need to talk through a lot of different things. So it depends. It's not a decision that you usually make on your own. You usually have like a project team. You maybe work with your PO or you work with your project manager, and then you guys can decide. So these are the stakeholders we need into this particular project workshop, and this is what we need from them. These are the different ways we're going to facilitate, the workshop and get the information out of them. And we're going to need a huge chunk of time. So you guys can play it by ear. Yeah. If you set it for half a day, it's not enough time, that's fine. You can set up another workshop another day. So it's usually dependent on the need. There are no hard and fast rules. But when you talk about workshop, because most of the time it's physical, although there are virtual workshops now, but most of the time it's face-to-face. So if you're asking people to leave their offices and come to a particular conference room, then you might as well get the most out of them and all of that. So workshops are usually a chunk of time. Let me just put it that way. Yeah. Hours at a time. Let me just put it that way. Okay, so what elicitation technique would you normally use or recommend? So that's a really good question. They both are actually. For the elicitation technique, now I usually, if you research BAs, you hear a lot of people talking about the BA toolkits or skill sets of BAs. Yeah, there are loads of competencies and skills and techniques and all of that. I liken it to a plumber. Yeah, you're in your house and there's a leak somewhere. Yeah, and you call a plumber. Your plumber can look at it and say, oh, I need a wrench for this particular thing, or I need a screwdriver for this particular thing. They come with their bag of tools. And when they see the problem, they're able to tell which tool works for a particular thing. And sometimes you see them, they'll try a particular tool, it won't work. They'll try another one, it works better. Or sometimes they may need to investigate. It may not be, it could be a dripping faucet, or it could be maybe something in the pipe. But because they came with their tool bag, they're able to tell which particular tool to use. So as BAs, you learn a whole range of skills and techniques and competencies. And then when you're in a particular place, you're like, oh, okay, this is where we are and this is where we want to be. So you already know the current states. We call it the as is. So this is the as is. And then you want to highlight the future state. This is the future state. Yeah. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? We know the current state, we know the future state. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? People are asking that question. You as a BA, okay, I need a gap analysis for this. That's the technique I need to use, because a gap analysis will tell you the gap between where you are and where you want to be and how to get there. Yeah. And you use gap analysis in these kinds of situations. So you come onto a project and you get people talking, and the way they're talking, you already know, I need a risk register for this particular thing. I need to create a process map. Maybe they're saying, okay, we need to improve this process. In order to improve the process, you have to understand the process, right? So you map out the process. In order to do that, you need a process map. So again, it depends. You just have to have your toolkit ready. You know the skill sets you have. And as they're talking, you can identify, because you're used to your tools, you can say, for this particular issue, this is the tool I need. For this, sometimes they may not even ask for it, but you as a BA, I've been on a project since December last year. This is now going on to 7 months. The project manager just started last month. She was away on maternity leave. Just today, she was like, oh, I need to talk about the pros and cons, because they want us to recommend different applications. There's a particular process they want to improve, but they're like, we don't want to go with one until we're sure that's the one that will meet our needs. So I've spent a lot of time gathering requirements, talking to stakeholders. People are signing off on their requirements. So we have like a whole BRD of all the requirements we need. But now we're looking through the options for the applications we want to use. So the PM said, oh, I'm creating like a high level, because as a project manager, a lot of times they give reports on the project. So I'm creating a high level document on the pros and cons of these tools. So I said, okay, earlier I created a gap analysis that actually highlighted all these things. You can look at my gap analysis and you'll be able to see the pros and cons highlighted there, the different benefits of some of these tools, because I'd looked through it before. And she picked up my gap analysis, and that's what she used to create her document. So there's so many things as BAs that we know that the project demands it. You just demand it, you put it in the project folder. If they need it, they need it. If they don't need it, it's fine. You've created it. So if someone asks you, you can always present it to them. So it depends. It depends on the situation. As a skilled BA, once you see the situation, you know what technique to use. And sometimes if you have people that have worked with BAs and are used to working with BAs, they'll tell you, why don't you create a gap analysis for me? Why don't you create a project discovery report for me, or a BRD or something? And then they'll help you that way. Okay. All right. So I think these are the two questions I have. Are there any questions? Anyone else who hasn't written down their question and wants to ask a question? No? Okay. So very quickly, I'm very sure we're going to have a session dedicated to this, but remember, BAs, you work ahead of sprint, and this is sprint 0. So you're going to have to start meeting with your product owners. I'm sure you're going into teams now. Each team will have its own product owner. So you need to identify who your product owner is and start meeting with them, because by the time sprint 1 comes, you should already have requirements elicited, refined, and approved. Okay, and that's why we started with this class, so you understand the requirements elicitation process. So if you need to go through this recording again, please do so. We're going to go through writing user stories again, documenting user stories again, because you're going to need that definitely. But very, very soon, I'm pretty sure this week, you're going to have a session with your PO, and then you can now decide your ways of working. So how you're going to have the BA and the PO for the agile project are like 6s and 7s. Like, you guys are really, really close. In fact, because the BAs are there, a lot of time the PO doesn't attend a lot of your project team meetings, but the BA and the PO work hand in hand for agile projects, and that's what you're going to do. So yeah, that's basically, I don't know what else I wanted to say about that. Like I said, you're going to be trained, and then once you receive the skills, you're going to put them into practice. But we know that just training and talking is not enough. So you're going to have a very robust working system. I'm just talking about BAs, but all the roles have this. You have mentors, you have buddies. Yeah. Your mentors are more experienced BAs. Your buddies are the BAs that just completed the set before you. So they identify with what you're doing very, very well. So if you're stretched or you're stressed, these are the people to meet. Yeah, you're going to talk to them. But basically, yeah, I think very soon the admin will tell you when you're meeting with your PO. So please get ready, attend those meetings. You don't want to miss those meetings. Okay. And if I'm going to give you any advice as a BA for this project, even though you're going to work collaboratively with other BAs, try your hand at everything. Even if you split the work, because you might have to split the work, try your hand at everything, because in most projects, you're the only BA. There are rarely two BAs. And if two BAs are working together, they're working on different things. Like I said, the project is so big, you're working on your own squad. So it's almost like your own project is so big that it's just your own project. So even though you're going to work collaboratively and you're encouraged to work collaboratively, try your hand on every user story, every process map, every document, everything you're supposed to do. Just practice and get that knowledge and make sure you have it. Research, watch these videos over again. You have a whole bank of videos. So if I didn't go into any particular thing in this particular one, you can watch another video on requirements elicitation and get more information. There's so many videos, so much material. You are the one who doesn't even have the time, but there's so much to do. So yeah, looking forward to working with you. I'll pause again to ask if you have any questions, and if you don't, then I will hand you over to your admin. So one last time, any questions for me? No? Okay. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. I made it before 10 o'clock, thank God. Damisola, over to you.